Hi, my name is Maureen Milliken, and my partner is Hunter Van Gorder. We read the book Unfair: The New Science of Criminal Injustice by Adam Benferrado.
In this eye-opening novel, Benferrado truly cracks into the injustices we see happening in the criminal justice system. Through his research, Benferrado conveys his message of psychological and neurological discoveries of how flawed our justice system can be. All stages of the system, whether it be police, judges, etc., they all appear to be guided more by intuitive feelings rather than gathering facts for making their assessments. Benferrado challenges the legal system at all levels on things we've become familiar with as being trustworthy and attacks their flaws. Not only does Benferrado give us insight on what's wrong with the system, but he also gives us some ideas on how we as a society can make changes and prevent our behavioral flaws moving forward. We have seen many adaptations in the history of our criminal justice system. For instance, in the 9th century, people would be pushed into the lake with cinder blocks tied to their ankles to see if they sank or floated. If you were to float, that would mean you're guilty, and if you were to sink, that would mean you're innocent. So essentially, they're letting the innocent drown. Pretty messed up, right? But in reality, we are no less surprised by the systematic unfairness in the 9th century than the centuries that follow us will be in our criminal injustices. As said in the book, our intuitions are so ingrained that it is hard to imagine that they might be wrong. Which brings us to today. Do we care that our justice system may be unfair for some, but greased for others? If it's not truly affecting you, are you bothered by the fact that some may be disadvantaged by things that are as simple as the color of the skin or the shape of their face? These are all ideas that Adam Benferrado brings up throughout this novel.
The author comes up with a good example relating to confirmation bias. He discusses a recent study in which DNA analysts were given a sample to confirm whether one of the suspects was involved in a crime or not. When given the backstory, these analysts came to a conclusion that the culprit's DNA matched the sample and therefore was guilty. However, when not given the backstory but given the same exact biological evidence, only one of the 17 DNA experts said the culprit's DNA was a match and the other 16 disagreed. This shows that information given beforehand can influence one's interpretation. If you don't go into a situation with an open mind, you are more likely to come to a premature conclusion and/or miss important evidence. Similar to what we've discussed in our live class meetings, pay is not always correlated with performance. Interestingly enough, in a study that involves solving a puzzle and measuring level dishonesty, it was found that even when it was easier for individuals to get away with cheating by lying how many matrices were solved, cheating generally did not increase. Furthermore, even when pay was increased for correct answers, cheating actually decreased. So we inherently do know that dishonesty can negatively affect the way we view ourselves as way others view us. So why do people cheat then? Among many reasons, the book describes just a few. For example, people who are able to convince themselves that untruthful behavior is acceptable are more able to justify such actions and not feel guilty after acting in a way that is detrimental to his or her ego. Additionally, when there is less of a direct relationship between the action and the reward, it is easier to act deceitfully. There was definitely a quote in the book that helped more clearly verbalize this idea, saying that scientists have found that people will cheat about twice as much when they are cheating to earn tokens that can be exchanged for money as when they are cheating to earn money directly. Finally, researchers have found that people may be more likely to cheat if it promotes altruism and the welfare of others instead of just themselves. Disgust is a universal emotion that can affect our actions. This connects to the story of David Rosenbaum, a New York Times journalist who was robbed on a night walk. After being found by a resident of the neighborhood, EMT and other dispatchers were called and arrived at the scene. Disgusted by the vomit on his shirt and among other factors, they decided it was alcohol poisoning. They morally distanced themselves and labeled his condition instead of looking further into other options despite their initial thoughts. The quote, moral disgust is linked to dehumanization, is seen here in David's case. The dispatchers were rather disgusted with his physical appearance and incoherent state, so after labeling him as a drunkard, they didn't treat him like a regular human patient by looking more objectively into his condition and considering other possible medical concerns. Additionally, Benferrado explains that sometimes humans tend to justify accidents from one's behavior. Connecting back to David's case, he appeared drunk, so in response they treated him like one without any immediate life-threatening urgency. As a result, he died the next day. And this is another example of confirmation bias.
In order to bring about change in our criminal justice system, we must first recognize that there is a problem, and from there we can start a reformation. A quote from Ben Ferrato is, "Being aware of our natural limitations isn't a cure-all, but it's a necessary first step." For example, Judge Frank Barbaro recognized his wrong sentencing in a trial over a decade ago. And rather than trying to cover it up, he admitted to his mistake and in turn was able to get the original ruling overturned. Another big step is holding our police force accountable. If the general population sees a practice as unfair, we need to recognize that, just like we would with a murderer or a rapist. We also can't let people get stuck at the bottom of the societal hierarchy. It seems as though we see the same people falling into this vicious cycle of unfair justice. But on the other side of the spectrum, we see rich people just being able to walk free. This is something that we as a society should not allow to happen. But what can we as civilians really do? First of all, we need to realize the main enemy of the justice system isn't a few bigoted cops, judges, or jurors, but rather our own minds. We must understand and accept the reality that we find within each of our minds. As Ben Ferrato stated in the novel, human nature, while deeply flawed in some ways, is also a source of profound goodness. We also need to realize that we can use technology as our friend in the courtroom. Things as simple as security cameras, along with forensic analysis that's improving year after year, could really be used to help us quickly close some of these cases that have been prolonged and rely on the flawed system. Moving forward, we really have to determine how much we want to rely on our own human cognition. With ideas like virtual trials, we can not only cut expenses, but hopefully eliminate some biases we see arising from live trials. Virtual trials would stop a lot of the drama we see arising in the courtroom. What Ben Ferrato said is, a lot of what is considered good for TV is considered bad for the criminal justice system. Unfairness is evident in our criminal justice system, and therefore the title is very much suited for this novel. Adam Ben Ferrato isn't afraid to take a jab at what is thought of as the most trustworthy part of our U.S. society, and for good reason. Blame is often our best excuse for doing nothing. Although we may act like we care and push for equality, the reality is some people have a greater chance of becoming criminals than others, and we just need to set our blame aside and act. Ben Ferrato essentially states that justice won't change itself, but it's us that need to push for that change.